Welcome to the inaugural LimaCharlie Dev Stream. I want to thank everyone for taking the time out and being with us today. Today's discussion is rather informal, but we do plan to cover a lot of ground. At a very high level, we'll start by doing a round of introductions, talk a little bit about the company and its history, the type of things we're working on today, and then spend some time talking about where we're going. We'd love for the discussion to be interactive. Depending on where you're watching us from, you can ask questions on the LinkedIn event page or from our YouTube stream. We'll do our best to answer those questions as they come in, but we'll be sure to get everything talked about before the end. We'll start with a round of introductions, and I will go first. My name is Christopher Luft. I'm a creative technologist here at LimaCharlie. I fill some of the gaps and tend to spend a lot of time around marketing and content. And so here is...
Hey, Chris. Hey, everyone. I'm Ross. I recently joined as the director of product, so I do all things product here at LimaCharlie.
Hi, I'm Rowan. I work at LimaCharlie. I work on front end.
Hi, everyone. Joe here. Yeah, co-founder at LimaCharlie, working in business development, and hope that this first meeting will be amazing.
Hey there, it's Francis. I do all backend here at LimaCharlie.
I'm Max, co-founder at LimaCharlie, and do a lot of things.
I think that's an understatement, Max. Yeah, thanks for doing this, everybody. I know it's a new one for us, and I'm excited. Max, to get us going, and for those joining us today that might not know, do you want to tell us what LimaCharlie is at a very high level? Sure.
So LimaCharlie essentially is a new type of product. What we're doing, right, we put it in one sentence at a really high level, but it's like AWS for cybersecurity. What that really means practically is we put products as primitives out, and EDR is like our first big, primitive that we ever built. It's kind of the bigger one, and the AWS part comes because everything that we do is done pretty differently than most other vendors in cybersecurity. In that everything we do is multi-tenant, self-serve, scale up, scale down, build monthly, API first. So the kind of things like characteristics you think of AWS. But in that fashion, we will put like product primitives, meaning, I say primitives because it's a different flavor, right? It's not the boxed product where like, here's, the 3 ways you can interact with it, but think a lot more like AWS, where you have access to all the APIs to kind of do all the things. So we do things like that for EDR, which expands into things like artifact ingestion. We do some SASE, so SASE. We do now external log ingestion as well. So we have a bunch of different primitives, and that's kind of an ecosystem that's always growing. So the idea is, we're designed for cybersecurity professionals. This is really, who we work with. And the idea is behind that is many of us are have a strong security background, and we wanted to make the tool that we wish we had access to before, right? Which is in between this, like, hey, this is a widget and there's very few ways you can interact with it. Don't worry, we protect you, don't worry about it. And I have to build it. Building it sucks. So we kind of go in that middle, and we give the primitives to be able to do all the cool things.
That's a great explanation. Do you want to maybe talk about how it came to be? I think the history of it is quite interesting.
Sure. So LimaCharlie, a long time ago, used to be an open source CDR. So I used to work at Google, and I worked on this open source CDR at the time, proving a lot of different technologies behind the EDR. So there's a lot to it. But then when I left Google, there was kind of the drive to do something in cybersecurity and to do something bigger. So we had this EDR in our back pocket, or at least kind of the primitive, right? It was an early open source project. But we didn't want to do just the classic EDR, right? We could have gone and done the EDR, but I think we realized that the cybersecurity market was going in a different, not in a different way, but in a way where there's a lot more professionals, cybersecurity professionals. And so we wanted to be able to kind of put something for the cybersecurity professionals, right? Not something where it's like, hey, even your grandma can stop the Russians, but rather, no, like this is a serious business, and we get people that understand cybersecurity, and we just want to make it better.
Sorry, I think we talk a lot about how it mirrored the evolution of IT as well. Like people used to rack and stack their own servers, get their databases from Oracle, and then AWS came along, which is where we get the analogy that eventually the maturity of the industry is such that people just want the capabilities. They don't need all the bells and whistles.
That's exactly right. But also at the same time, what we realize is that that's a pretty new concept, right? Most people in cybersecurity we would talk to, like that was just wildly different, right? Even the way that we do things, we talk about the way doing AWS, that was just so different that we really had to start with the foundation, meaning the EDR, right? We came out with like the EDR was our EC2, and we really started there with an EDR that at the time, at the very beginning, was just middleware. We didn't even do retention. That really, I think, speaks a lot to how LimaCharlie evolved from like, hey, we're selling EDR, we're talking about EDR, and then as we added more and more primitives to the platform, that story is kind of shifting, and now we can start to talk to people about not just EDR, although it's a core part of what we do for a lot of
security infrastructure as a service, right? Like
that's
the
right.
whole thing,
and how they can play with each other, right? How the various primitives, just like AWS, we're not taking 10 different products and kind of trying to glue them together and like do this weird thing. We're building things so that it works together inherently. So yeah, we started that. We've been adding primitives ever since, and growing ever since. So just in the last year, we've slightly more than doubled the size of our team, I think. So that's been really cool.
And speaking, Ross, you're our most recent hire. What's your impression of the company so far?
It's awesome. I mean, no, it's a very interesting question. You see, I'm coming from a different industry. So I've been in fintech, I've been in e-commerce, I've been around wholesale and like some B2C experiences. And at first, when we started talking about joining LimaCharlie, like I honestly couldn't grasp the concept. And the reason I couldn't, because to me, many things that we are trying to do are plain obvious. Like, for example, the idea that the customer should have access to the product before they start paying for it. It's like, yeah, I mean, of course, you should be able to just create an account and like understand how the product works without having to go through a bunch of different demos and talk to salespeople. Like that's the product-led growth that we talk about and we see today at essentially every single industry except security. So when I started to look at cybersecurity, like I was absolutely shocked that you cannot simply gain access to some of the biggest products out there. You need to talk to a bunch of salespeople. You need to get a demo. Then you would attend another demo. They would size an opportunity and even understand if you're worth talking to. And if you aren't, then well, you're not getting access to the product. It was so different from anything I've seen before that I realized that cybersecurity, it's the space where control stays with the vendor. Like it's very interesting to like from the product perspective. It's very interesting for me to try and understand the power dynamics of different industries. Like most industries are shifted towards the customer having the control over what they do, how they do it, what they pay, how they pay, and so on. But in cybersecurity, it's still the vendors who generally hold the power. They often decide that, yeah, I know it's your data, but you don't get to choose where it goes. You don't get to choose like how to access your data. I get it. You're paying for this product, but you don't get to choose how to use it. We're giving you like 1 or 2 ways in which you can use the product. So this concept of control was incredibly exciting. And like when I did finally get what LimaCharlie is attempting to do, I was like, oh yeah, I'm in. Let's do it. So you asked how do I feel about LimaCharlie? I feel like we're trying to do something that has never been done before in cybersecurity. And yet we are trying to do something that has been done in many other industries. So to me, it's an inevitability. It's just so obvious that we ultimately we need to keep going, and eventually we win.
We'll get there. Yeah. Thanks, Ross. I think we have a lot to be proud about this last year. We've done a lot of work, a lot of new team members. One of the things I wanted to call out, Amrik Rendhawa, our Chief Operating Officer, was unable to join us today, but he led our SOC 2 Type 2 certification this year. I was going to ask him about it. I can't speak to the details, but I know it was a monumental process, and he made it run really smooth, in part because our process was already very good. So there wasn't too much work. It was mostly around documentation and stuff like that. So Amrik, if you end up watching this, thank you so much. That was such a great contribution, and we're better for it. And then past that, anybody who's been using LimaCharlie for any length of time has probably noted some dramatic improvements to the web application. Rowan, our very talented front-end developer, has been leading a lot of fundamental changes to the web application, and I was hoping you could speak to that a little.
Yeah, sure. We have a running joke at LimaCharlie that a lot of stuff is just front end. And that's just the shape of what I do at LimaCharlie. So whatever you interpret that to mean, it's what we've been up to. But yeah, I wanted to show off in particular, like a year ago. Here, I'll share a tab. This is a little trip down memory lane. Hopefully that's working. Yeah. Okay. So a year ago, if you logged into LimaCharlie, it would look like this. You have a list of organizations you can go into, and then I'm going to go into LC demo. It's our demo org. You show up at the dashboard. Same data. It's like nothing's changed too dramatically. A lot of the Chrome around it a little bit different. The navigation's different. But if I go to sensors, you couldn't click a sensor right here. You had to go and click one of these tiny actions on the side, and you could go and see, you know, what's a sensor. I've connected something to LimaCharlie. What's going on here? We had like separate tabs or separate windows that would open up if you wanted to go and check out the timeline of events that might have happened. Sometimes notifications would fly at you. But if I went and did a search here, you'd see a sneak peek of our logo moving. And then we get a list of events. And a lot of our OG customers probably are familiar with this.
I think you're sharing a specific tab, so we're not seeing the.
Oh, it opened a new tab. And then
yeah, that's right. Yeah, more fun with the old interface.
Yeah, I moved it into this tab now. Hopefully it shows up.
It's good.
Yeah, I think it's showing up. Okay. So I'm looking at the timeline now. This is like timeline a year ago. It's frozen in time for all of us to walk down memory lane together. And it's really focused on process tree. It's like really focused on LimaCharlie as an EDR. And over the past year, we realized that the concept of sensor is actually a little bit broader than that. So I'm going to go back to this view, and we can see that there's like different types of sensors that are available. And the concept of sensor has really opened up for us and has become like a pivotal point of like, what is LimaCharlie about? Sensors are just ways of connecting sources of telemetry to the cloud. And so we've had to kind of reimagine what sensors are to do that more effectively. So I'm going to go look at what things look like today. I'm going to go jump into LC demo, and we can actually click into a sensor. And there's lots of different things that might be available to a sensor depending on what capabilities it has. Like some sensors or EDR sensors will definitely have access to a console. You can interact with the box like a shell. But almost all of them will have some kind of timeline of events that have transpired. And so this is not yet on production, but we've really moved towards a giant log viewer. Like, this is just a lot of stuff that has occurred on a box over time, and you can see what kind of events have occurred. And in this case, we might be interested in processes, and you can still look at the process tree for this particular event, and that's all still going to work the same. But really giving the space to use this as a log viewer for like ingesting data from many different sources and being able to browse a lot of different sources more granularly based on what their capabilities are. So this is like GCP audit logs. We can go see stuff coming in here.
It's kind of a continuation in a way that of the thing that we started early on, which was just the idea that whether data came from a Windows box or a Mac, it's the same, fundamentally the same data. You can view it through the same viewer. You can apply logic in the same way. And it's like we've taken that and kept diluting it to say, well, this is really much wider than that, right? So you didn't get into it, but like, we're now bringing in things like GCP audit logs or carbon black sensors. And so that definition becomes wider and wider, and like, yeah, we're kind of filling up that vision slowly of like AWS, right? Bigger than just the EDR.
Totally. It all feeds into the same rule engine, and it becomes a really interesting focal point for these different telemetry sources to do correlation across things in the future. That's kind of like one of the things that we've got our eye on. Like, okay, like the reality of like security landscapes, we've got a bunch of different silos of data right now, like different vendors solve different problems, but then you've got a complex relationship between many different things. Maybe you have somebody unauthorized, like using a box that they shouldn't be. They're in there and they're doing things, and maybe they're like, trying to get access to something, some cloud service. And how do you see logs from there and interactions with a host that shouldn't be happening and correlate these things? It's something that we're definitely interested in exploring. And now we have it all funneling into one rule engine. So
in having it, I think I think in a way we're understating just how important it's going to be in the future for everything to come in through the same kind of generic funnel and formatting and processing. Because the moment that we start introducing new features, and that's something we've done on the agent side for a while, but like the moment we start introducing new features, let's say in the rule engine, we're not trying to like build some kind of glue logic across like 20 different products and then having to like one by one adapt and do weird things. We just apply it in one spot, and then all of the sensors, like everything, just gains that value from it. So that makes me really excited, because we really start to be a layer where, pardon like the wording, but like we're going to start adding magic, right? Like we're going to be a layer where, you bring in a new data source, and it doesn't matter if it's a fairly simple data source or complex, but by bringing it to LimaCharlie, it's going to be a whole layer of like magic around detection and automation and all that stuff. That's just you're going to get everything at once, from it, versus having to focus on the individual product and kind of add a feature here and there and do that kind of stuff.
Max,
I think go ahead, Ross. Sorry.
Max, let's call it a powerful science, but not magic.
I agree.
Yeah.
As a developer, I don't like magic. Magic means that there's bugs afoot.
I was going to say, as a good early example of that's probably the real-time Windows event log ingestion that we introduced this year, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Do you want to speak to what that is for people?
Sure. I mean, the TLDR, that right, relating to the conversation we were having, is we added the ability from the agent to just say, hey, I want to subscribe to these events and maybe with these filters, Windows event log. And we're bringing them in, not like through another product or like some other, side channels, but we're bringing them in real time through the agent. And the power that you get there is that as soon as we enabled it, we had nothing else to do to automatically gain the ability to detect in context various signatures or behavior, whatever you want to call it, through a detection engine, like in the context of the endpoint. And then we had like Sigma signatures that we're able to, grab from the open source Sigma project, and we can kind of convert. And all at once, it just meant, well, you just automatically get the ability to, go and detect those in real time with the whole context of the endpoint. And we didn't have anything else to do. So I as a developer, like, I love those times where you're adding one sliver of feature and then you get the whole power of everything else that's behind it. So that's really cool.
Francis. Sorry,
a lot
Francis
of
is joined.
stones laid. Oh,
sorry, Rowan, go for it.
I say a lot of stones laid one at a time that really, really add up, and each of them are exposed often as features that are available for everybody to leverage. We're building on top of them, but they're also low-level capabilities, often per sensor, that you can use yourself and combine creatively. So we're just building off the top of the stuff that we're already making available for everybody.
That's right.
Yeah, and I think that's always neat to point out to people too, that our web application is built with our publicly available and publicly documented API. So there's really no secret sauce anywhere. It's that's sort of our open source roots, I think, bleeding through into this commercial product we built. Is it's full transparency, and you can build what you want. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I like to call it our reference web UI.
Yeah, it's just front end.
Do not build it like the web UI. You can do way better.
Yeah. I was going to call out that Francis has rejoined us today. Francis has been gone for the wonderful reason. Don't want to put him on the spot to speak about that, but
too late, Chris.
I'm going to do it. Yeah.
It's been what, 3 weeks now? 4 weeks almost?
I think about 4 weeks. Yeah.
Yeah. New dad here. Barely sleeping, but glad to be here.
Yeah. So since you've joined us, I'm going to ask you to talk about, I know one of the things that a lot of customers haven't seen, but that's been a really great thing happening behind the scenes this year, is the massive shift we've gone from moving our code base from Python over to Go. And I know you've done a lot of work on that. So maybe you could chat about that for a second.
That's right. It's been a lot of rewrites, but I think mostly the benefits for the end user is not really visible unless we're talking about performance and stability. It's a huge win for us. It makes our nights better when you're not a new dad, but when you work the day-to-day. Yeah.
It feels like a more solid foundation for the future.
For
right?
sure. For sure.
Yeah, and I think, Max, you had talked about the other day, sort of as we scale, the Python was starting to show cracks, and being able to rewrite everything as Go has just sort of smoothed out the path for us. So.
Yeah. I mean, without getting too, sorry.
I mean, it's like there's a particular thing we could point to that's like particularly good, which is like the GRPC library, right? Like there was like some particular issues with the Python implementation, right?
Yeah, exactly. It was part Python, but also part the kind of some of the foundation of how we built it. Mm-hmm. Without getting too much into the weeds, it's kind of we kind of built a lot of our initial infrastructure on Python plus G-Event. Because, as you can probably imagine, most of what we do is like async IO between microservices. So we said, okay, let's start going that route. And really the killer thing is that we're also built on Google Cloud Platform. So we make use of a ton of GCP architecture, and the combination of GRPC, which is like the new interface for a lot of GCP services, plus G-Event plus Python is just, it's a recipe for disaster. It essentially like devolves down to a single threaded, thing where you don't get the advantages of G-Event and all that. So, we kind of ended up going down that wrong path, but now pretty much everything we have is kind of converted to Python or on the way to Python. Yeah.
This might be a good time to actually talk about replay. Like that one was like, what a facelift.
Yeah,
Totally.
and let's just talk about replay at a high level for people that don't know. I'll give it a shot. Max, you can jump in if I get off track here. So replay is something pretty unique to LimaCharlie in that we let users run their DNR rules over historical data. Why this is interesting is that because it allows you to sort of take a continuous integration style approach to developing your detection and response rules. So you can make changes quickly and test them against sort of known results and move forward in a sort of DevOps kind of way. Is that?
Yeah. I would add to it, like, a little bit, peering behind the curtain a little bit is, so it allows you to do that replay thing. And then historically, replay used to be Python, and it was kind of like a little bit shaky. And one of the things that we're doing is we're leveraging Cloud Run in Google Cloud Platform that allows us to make this tiny request-based service and say, you know what, if you need like 1,000 cores for 30 seconds, it'll just kind of magically scale up and down to it. And so introducing, like, porting it to Go really allowed us to really lean into that aspect of things, right? Where historically, let's say you have an ELK cluster and you're trying to do something like replay, you're gonna have to you might have to scale that cluster or the access patterns, and you have to worry about it. And so that's one of the advantages that we've had in GCP is because we manage so little infrastructure, in the grand scheme of things, that it's really easy for us to just say, like, hey, Cloud Run, go from like that one container to 1,000 containers running through like, a petabyte of traffic, in 30 seconds, and just to do that with minimal effort. So that's been really cool.
It looks like no matter what you do, you can't, like, we can't really avoid the word magic, can we? Yeah,
it's so not magic.
It's so not magic, but it's the net effect is magic.
Yeah, it's funny because, like, I remember we've talked about a couple of weeks ago, we've talked about magic and how LimaCharlie is different from the magical tools on the market, whereby like people have to trust vendors to keep them safe, while what we do is something totally different. I know, Roman, I know you have some good opinions about security being a process, not a feature.
Yes, I agree. That is my opinion. Okay. I want to talk more about replay. Replay is so cool. I think I might just like share my screen about it, because like the benefit of like having replay rewritten in Go is that like it's way faster. Like we're able to run it in Cloud Run. We can like get you results for like running most replay events, most like series of events. Like if it's like, just replay on the last day of telemetry that came in my org, like you can run that in like a few seconds. And so you can actually like have it come in live in the web app as feedback. So I'm going to share my screen. I just want to show like a quick replay.
Live demo.
Uh-oh. What could go wrong?
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
Here we go.
So there's some cool stuff. I'm going to go look at the timeline again real quick. But you can go and look at historical telemetry for a box. And like, let's say I see some network connection. I'm not really picky about the event right now, but we can actually build a DNR rule directly from this event we care about. It's going to bring us in. We have a draft rule that we're writing right now. And it loaded in this network connections event that we picked up there. And it kind of populated with like a very basic detection rule. But we can test this event really easily, just see, did it match? What matched in this rule? And this is just such a great experience for like testing out different ideas. And you don't even need to use this target event. You could actually scan the history. So I could go to that box. I know it's 2016. We have a few duplicate sensors on this board. So I have to like, I actually remember which one on the list.
Oh yeah, nice.
I've like done this enough times, but I don't want to run this as a background job. I want to see the results right here. And I can like run this against the historical data set. And I can see if well, in this case, that's a terrible rule that'll match basically anything, but
Yeah.
that's life.
Okay.
It matched, right? So we get feedback live when you're writing a rule. And this is like my favorite part about the replay is that it gives us like the ability to give like way faster feedback when writing rules, which is probably the most like powerful thing you can do in LimaCharlie is writing rules. So it's really nice to be able to get feedback as you're doing it and testing.
Yeah, and to get to what Chris was actually just saying around like magic versus understanding your position, right? I think that's where we're kind of hitting an interesting line, which is we're trying to make the primitives. The primitives will be magic, right? In a sense that like, hey, you can replay 6 months of data in like, I don't know, a minute and a half or whatever it is, right? But replay itself is completely unopinionated, right? So we show it here as, I'm testing, building this rule and apply it. It could also be like, I'm responding to an incident in my company and there's this really weird behavior. It's not an IOC, it's not a hash. And I want to look historically if we had seen it. But it can also be building, like testing changes in a CI/CD pipeline to rules. Or it could be because I'm building a product that does like inventory management, and I'm looking for specific like patterns in the telemetry that describes a change of infrastructure on like endpoints. Like it's open, right? We're not making like here's a blinking red light that tells you if you've been hacked. It's like here's a magic, like just use it however it works.
Yeah, it's something that we haven't made exactly easy to do yet. Like you could like curate like sets of events that represent attack patterns, but like there's nothing stopping you from doing this and replaying and testing against those events if you're able to get those.
Yeah, it's like to have a pre-production always available without having a pre-production infrastructure. That's fantastic. And
exactly.
we were focusing. Go, Max.
No, go for it.
No, we were focusing on speed since the beginning in terms of detection, in terms of response, and that's the cool part because analysts are saving time, security experts are saving time, and then we understood that this speed, we put the speed even on steroid with the templates, the possibility to expand like the detection and response rule in a different way because threats are complex, and we added the telemetry from different data sources, and we can orchestrate a trigger detection through templates. So the security posture of a company can be really summarized in something that is portable, is scalable, and I always say it's the product we wanted to use when we were working on it exactly, on the front line, and now we are, it's there for everyone as is evolving. So
I think that's sorry.
Go for it.
I think that's a great thing that Joe brought up is the templates, which speaks to sort of the scalability first approach that we take. I think the infrastructure service is something we introduced this year, making it really easy for people to, once they configure a tenant inside LimaCharlie, sort of take the file that describes all the configuration for that organization and just spin up new orgs with that. So it could be updating rules across all your orgs through one CLI command, or spinning up a new client with a trusted configuration to start. So.
And it's a little bit like what Ross was describing in a way, right? Where that's at a high level, that's not a new concept, right? Like Terraform, right? Like Ansible, like all these guys have been doing this concept, this DevOps concept. But in cybersecurity, it feels like it's a whole lot of point and click. So I feel like we're just kind of bringing in the lessons over, right? It's pretty cool.
I'd say so.
Yeah,
and it's interesting to see. Sorry, Ross, go ahead.
Go, Chris. Oh my God, I'm enjoying this online talk, like online meeting format. It's so hard not to talk over each other. Crazy. Go ahead, Chris.
No, I've lost it now, so you really got to go.
No, I was just wondering. So, like, we've talked about replay. We've talked a bit about the infrastructure as code. Like, what are the other things that you're excited about? Like, what are the other cool things that we have done this year?
You go first.
No, if I can, from my point of view, I think because I know security is related a lot to mobile device or whatever device is, it's not possible to install a specific sensor, and we created like net. So we have like super powerful. I cannot even define it, Max. If you can, it's not like just network monitoring or VPN. It's something more that it's joined and merged together with all the detection capability in real time. So it's fantastic. So net is one of the innovation, mainly during the pandemic when people needed specific like a safe way to communicate with the asset for working from home. So I think it was a job that started before, but right, was super useful in that said moment, and we were happy. We had the LimaCharlie net in place.
Yeah, it's one of those things that we kind of built to our specs in a way, right? And I think it's interesting because in a way, philosophically, it fits with a lot of things that we're doing in that. We are a remote company, and so that means we don't have physical offices. We don't have a perimeter. So kind of the ideas around Beyond Corp, kind of makes sense. And so when we built Net, we ended up building
software-defined networking product.
Yes, exactly. And we didn't end up building it with like legacy networks in mind. I really attach no connotation to like when I say legacy, it's just like old like brick and mortar, like various subnets and all that, right? It's really built for us, which is to define it a little bit, like Chris was saying, is essentially we took WireGuard and made it compatible with the LimaCharlie ecosystem, meaning like self-serve, scale up, scale down. And then although it supports kind of complex network topologies, we said, well, we get just so much simplicity and power from going device to device. Instead of like saying, there's a whole network trunk going through this interface and then trying to parse and understand the data as it flies, we just said, like, no, like each device is, on net. And then that gives you just so much freedom in doing micro-segmentation, because like you're looking at a single device. You can apply policies conceptually to single devices. It's a sensor, like Rowan was describing, right? So it's just another sensor generating telemetry. So now I can look at the net flow type information in LimaCharlie. I can build rules on it, and it lives in the cloud. So we can start automating in our ecosystem, like doing PCAPs in the cloud without being on the endpoint. And I think it's really cool, but I think it's also more compatible to kind of, where more and more companies are going to be and where we are, and less to do brick and mortar. So it's been an interesting experience.
Yeah, I think it's so cool that you can just have a sensor connect to another sensor, like through a software policy, and just be like, yeah, this service is now available for these particular clients. You can just like tag a group of clients and be like, these are the folks that have permission to access this. And it's like the only way that that's going to be exposed. And it's exactly how you define it. And it's very granular, very powerful. And we use it internally for just like shortcut links. Like you can do custom DNS resolutions through it, which is also really handy. Just as a point of convenience, if you already have this kind of software perimeter defined, like you can choose to link it to convenient resources as well. There's a lot of creative ways you can use that when you have your own kind of software networking solution.
The other big one, I think, from this year that we haven't talked about yet is comms, which is sort of the operational console we've made for LimaCharlie.
Yeah, it's a thing. Comms is a thing. There's a button you can press and you go to comms, and it's a place in the app. I can talk a little about it.
Go for it.
It's we have all this data coming into LimaCharlie, all these sensors connecting, and all these detections that may occur based on your rules. Maybe you've applied like managed rule sets like Sigma, or maybe you're using Soteria rules Shout out to Soteria, they're awesome. And or you have your own rules. You're writing all these custom detection response rules, and you have all this stuff going on. How do you manage it? What do you do to call it done? At the end of the day, like your job is to like make sure that any incidents potentially get handled. Comms is kind of our take on that. We wanted to create an environment that teams can work together and manage emerging incidents. And like if like a lot of stuff is coming in a particular detection, like a particular kind of detection is occurring commonly across your org, you can see this funneling into one place, even if it's happening across many orgs. So if you haven't looked at comms before, could take a look-see. Actually,
I don't know if it's
it goes deep, but
Yeah.
but some of the highlights is that you can actually task sensors directly from comms. In comms, there's like a console that you can interact with. So it's got a message feed, but it's also got commands directly from it, kind of akin to Slack. So you can interact with LimaCharlie's kind of capabilities in a very tightly integrated way that let you take action on detections that are coming in. So you can see just the stream of detections coming in. You can see which hosts they're coming in from, and you can do something about that if you know what kind of actions you want us to take towards remediation or continued investigation, which kind of gives a shared kind of console where everybody can see that my teammate is doing something as well, and just not duplicating effort in the case that you have maybe multiple people responding to an incident at the same time, but also like, you know, sharing with one another, like this is what I do in this case, and it's visible to another person who is still learning.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, to put together a kind of interactive playbook that it's now transfer from maybe people that are entering in a company and they want to know how an incident was managed, an incident was solved. And if you think that you have just maybe another indicator and you can again use replay to and understand if there is something new in the same investigation, reopen a room that was closed, or it's something that helps a lot. I think the knowledge sharing and the approach to problem solving of like cybersecurity threat and the way those incidents are managed. It's interesting also for logging action, for customers that want to know what's happening, how the incident was worked, who took part to the incident. So it was really people oriented. The command line, I think, it's in our DNA. The idea of the API and the command line at the beginning, LimaCharlie was completely. We maybe Max, we didn't know if. The idea of the user interface was maybe half and half. We will work mainly, people will use LimaCharlie mainly with the API, but then now, through the very nice user interface, we can finally use the command line in a different fashion. And so we have the great user interface and then the command lines that the analysts, the security guys can use within in the UI.
Yeah, it's been an interesting philosophical, I would say, exercise in that, you hear probably people like at LimaCharlie talk a whole lot about infrastructure, and comms is inherently operational. So that boundary, that fuzzy boundary between, hey, we're making infrastructure that people can use as primitives and all that stuff, and it would be not easy, but like it would be a normal to put an operational tool like that in a very well-defined, like this is the workflow, you click on that, you go there, the pop-up opens with that, right? And we're trying to stay away from it. We're trying to always keep in mind, how would somebody use this as a pure API? And I think comms has been the most challenging of all the products that we have in terms of finding, where on that spectrum we want to hit.
Oh yeah, kind of scares me sometimes, to be honest. Yeah. Like it's like people are using Slack for messaging, they're using their preferred SIM tool for managing all of the stuff that's going on, and they have like LimaCharlie for like all of the kind of primitive stuff. This is very much a layer on top of that, and it has some expectations on it.
Yeah, I think it's like the tool, it's the product that we have that I suspect will be the one that we will learn the most from going forward, right? Some of the tools we do, like replay, is like, I mean, it's a simple definition, and we build the thing and it works, right? Comms has a lot more nuance to it, and I suspect that in the years to come, there's going to be a lot more variation around it.
It has heft.
Yes.
Yeah. So this is probably the I guess almost the time for us to switch into talking about what's next for LimaCharlie. But before we do, and I know Chris is going to ask that question. So Chris, I'm not taking your MC role.
No,
I just
please.
pull out another thing that I'm personally super excited about that we did this year, but also that we are doing in general. And it's the fact that LimaCharlie, like, we are not trying to reinvent the wheel. Like, we are not trying to rebuild the things that are already doing quite well and that already exist in the market. And instead, we are taking some of the bits and pieces that people love and trying to bring them in and make them easier to use. Like, for example, the example of the Atomic Red team. Like, we are not saying that, hey, we're going to replace all the cool stuff that already exists. Instead, it's like, okay, let's take what's already out there and make it super easy to use so that you don't have to deal with your own infrastructure. You don't have to deal with all the deployments, and just like come in, and in one click you can get done wherever you want to get done. And I know we've got a number of questions in the chat, and so one of the very first one we have is, what's upcoming behind the scenes? What features or what things we are looking on?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at beginning that aspect, right? So there's obviously there's some long-term stuff that we're not really going to get into. It's just more speculative at this point. But the things that you will be seeing kind of come out, right, is more so. So the things that come to my mind, and then please, like, guys, chime in. So there's what we internally call USP, which we can chat a little bit about. There's so Atomic Red Team we released fairly recently. There's Velociraptor that will be coming soon. Like, those are, I think, the three that are kind of like, right around like this time.
Just one is huge.
Yeah, exactly. So USP is like really, really large. Like Velociraptor, if you know forensic, you can imagine what that's probably is to just use LimaCharlie to go and deploy at scale and collect artifacts and do all that cool stuff. USP is the Universal Sensor Protocol, and that is the underlying technology that we use to bring in external data sources. So you might have seen us talk about carbon black sensors now that are supported in LimaCharlie. And that's like that LimaCharlie adding a layer of magic, like, to me fits really in that, carbon black does their thing and we bring it in and we apply a layer of like value that you get from it. But we also have, 1Password audit logs, GCP audit logs, CloudTrail audit logs. We're going to be adding things like Office 365. And so we're going to be talking about these end products that all really rely on USP under the hood. So the idea is that you're going to see what Rowan was talking about, like the number of sensors explode in the new year. Not so much because, hey, we put like 50 engineers on building each one of those integrations, but a lot more because, we've designed this pretty well so that we can start just adding those really quickly. And then again, you get the full power of the platform every time that you go forward.
And customer can do it themselves. They can deploy their integration. So that's lovely.
That's right. Their own syslog and stuff like that. Anybody else has other?
So much data.
Yes.
Yeah. No, the USP is the big one. I think that's the big one. I think it's pretty ambitious. I think it's like we have a lot to do there.
Yeah, and if we sprinkle the global correlation that's going to be coming up this year, like that is, it's one product, but really, like it's
like correlating across sensors, like different sources of data. How do we detect things happening between them?
I think we still speak about sensor, but the concept of sensor for LimaCharlie now is completely different. It's no longer the EDR idea, but it's something very holistic that can be correlated and and the detection can flow in real time. And I think, Max, we are speaking of milliseconds, so something like super fast.
It kind of begs the question of what's going to, I feel like we've just done like a phase expansion of what sensor means. I wonder if there's going to be another one in the future and what that's going to be. I don't know.
I mean, another big vein of effort that's currently going on is giving some consideration to how we structure the web application to make it a lot more approachable. Right now, it's kind of a kitchen sink. All the features are kind of there in your org, and you can use any of them pretty quickly if you know what they are. But if you don't know what they are, there's a lot at once. And so we're trying to like structure these a little more intentionally. So, sensors are always going to be top of mind. That's kind of the lifeblood of LimaCharlie, where your data is coming in from. But there are lots of features in there that we'd like to structure a little bit better to make the web application a little more approachable. So we're working on that. There's some timeline improvements that I think I previewed at the beginning here that aren't on production just yet, but we're trying to make that a lot more usable for browsing like broader data sources, like not just literally the process timeline on a particular type of sensor, but log viewing as a more general concept of timeline of events that have occurred.
Yeah, it's interesting because as soon as we start talking about bringing in all the external logs, allowing global correlation, allowing detections and response and storage and so on, it naturally leads us into a very different territory where I know historically we've been trying to build towards different use cases as opposed to trying to fit a specific Gartner label. But naturally, as moving in the direction of dealing with the logs, it begs the question, and that's actually a question that was just asked in chat. Are we trending to be towards the SIM space? Max, what are your thoughts around that?
So absolutely, it makes sense. The question makes sense, right? Looking at it, but I will kind of take a step back and say, we built this platform to be the things that we wanted, and I don't know if anybody's ever wanted the label SIM itself, right? Like we don't focus on labels. If you know LimaCharlie, you've heard us talk about it. We touch on a ton of different labels across, Gartner labels, but we don't focus on one specifically because we think at the end of the day, if we're going towards an AWS of cybersecurity with all the tools there, trying to bucket things into a label really is not helping anybody. So yeah, absolutely. USP kind of brings us a little bit closer in some ways to the SIM space, but I will say, are we trying to build a SIM? Absolutely not. There's a ton of use cases, like grep into SIM, or if you think about Splunk or, SIM means so many things to so many different people. We're not trying to go down this specific route. We're really focusing right now on, can we make LimaCharlie this amazing layer where you can bring all your telemetry, you can do a ton of automation, of a ton of detection and response, and have things like retention, taken care of, so that then, maybe you do have a SIM, but instead of you trying to ingest, 100 gigs of telemetry a day in your SIM and paying $5 million a year, instead you end up focusing the use case that you do in your SIM to the things that it's actually good at. So you're saying, okay, I'm going to bring in the LimaCharlie, and then the 1 gig a day of actual things that make sense for me to ingest in my SIM is what I'm going to bring in, and then I'm going to do cool stuff there. So that's more the type of way that I think we think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like to think about the fact that because we are talking about the infrastructure as a service, we are naturally touching on different labels. So we address some of the use cases that then like a VPN would address. We address some of the use cases that normally EDRs do. Some of the use cases that the log aggregation solutions do. Some of the ones that SOAR does. Some of the ones that SIM does. So instead of saying, hey, we are building this 4-letter thing or 3-letter thing, wherever that is, we are saying, hey, we are looking to solve the problems that your company has when it comes to their security. And there is another good question, which naturally leads us into more of a strategic part of the conversation. And I know we only got like 5 minutes left. What percentage of the market share has LimaCharlie acquired in the past year, and what percentage growth are we envisioning? Like, what are our plans for growth and expansion as we go into next year?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I mean, keeping it at a high level, right? We've grown very significantly in the last year, and our plan is to grow even more significantly in the next year. We're going to be raising some additional capital, so that's really going to be able to get us to really step on the gas, because it's becoming so clear that there are so many ways that we can have such a big impact. Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
there's a lot of foundational work to be done here to provide infrastructure and these broad capabilities. And we've been laying stones. That's the way I've been looking at it. There's like a solid foundation here that we're starting to see, how we can take one step with all these pieces we built, and we can, Velociraptor, you can like deploy a payload and run it and get the results back and store it as an artifact in LimaCharlie. Like, that's one of the things that we're working on right now. And it's like, it didn't take us a lot of time to build that particular thing, but it took a lot of time to build all of the supporting pieces that got us to the point where now we can add Velociraptor and make that available for IR firms. And it's not like a huge hassle to do anymore. Infrastructure.
For every new stone, we get compounding results.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think we may need a second episode of this call, because a lot of things that we were unable to say in 1 hour. So, but,
we still have a couple of minutes. So how about all of us how about we go around the room and just say a couple of things that we're excited about going into the next year that are not specific product features. Something more generic. I'm not going first.
Yeah.
I'm going to do a specific product feature because you told me not to. I really want to make it so that Sigma rules are visible in the web application, so you can learn from what Sigma rules look like and see how those look like as detections in LimaCharlie, so that, this is just a huge library for learning. Like, as a developer, I read code to learn how to write code. I don't see it being much different for detectors as code. So I'm looking forward to exposing more of that.
I'm looking forward to improving the developer experience. I think documentation, training, onboarding, there's so much work for us to do to just make the platform easier to get on and get going, and show people the full power.
I can go. I'm really excited to see how we'll improve our head count, and how we'll make that powerful new recruits for LimaCharlie and make more good features.
Yeah, I think I can go, and with the headcount, and there will be new idea, new point of view. This is crucial for us. We are super flexible, and I'm super happy really when we can speak frankly to each other and take the right decision at the moment of deploying a feature. That's the most important part.
Yeah, and I'll kind of add on to, I think, a couple of points that you guys have said, which is I'm really looking forward to seeing that multiplier aspect of like all the stones that we've put in place, and to see how many new, cool things that we can build that people can use right away, right? I think that the coolest thing for me is we get to build things that, a month later, actual users can go and start using, and then everybody can just turn it on and start using, right? We're not building multi-year products around, sales teams and like the whole thing. We're just delivering capability. And so I'm really excited to see like how we can accelerate that even more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. I think we're at time. Oh, do you want to squeak it in?
I just want to squeak one thing. Far Hannibal on the YouTube chat, like a lot of good questions, but on that point specifically, like that Max just said, all these Stone's cascading the capabilities that we're able to offer. Like Far Hannibal asks, like, do we not see Velociraptor as a competing product? No, Velociraptor is an open source tool that is really useful and doesn't solve the hosting and scaling challenges that we solve. And so it's perfectly compatible. That's the way we view it. And we want to look for more tools like Velociraptor and things that would work well in that ecosystem. And if you have ideas, like, we're always open to hearing them.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So we're at time. I think that's it for this live event. I want to thank everybody who joined us. It's a first for us, and I hope you enjoyed it. If it wasn't clear from the talk, we're a very open team and love chatting with customers. If you have any questions or just want to chat, please don't hesitate to reach out. We're on Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube. We also have a community Slack that you can join from the footer of our website, LimaCharlie.io. Thank you.